We all want answers. When you lose someone you love, when you look up at the stars on a quiet night, when you wonder why you're here at all, these moments feel too big for silence. For most of human history, religion was the only voice that spoke back. But what happens when we ask those same questions with the tools of evidence and reason? What if the answers we find are different from the ones we were taught? Let's begin with something personal, something most of us can relate to. Throughout human history, we've believed many things that turned out to be wrong. Not because we were stupid or gullible, but because we were doing our best with limited information. Our ancestors believed the earth was flat because standing on the ground it looks flat. They believed the sun revolved around us because that's what it appears to do each day. They believed diseases were caused by bad air or divine punishment because they couldn't see bacteria or viruses. They believed epilepsy was demonic possession because they had no understanding of neurology. In each case, these beliefs made sense given what people could observe at the time. And in each case, they were wrong. What changed wasn't human nature or our capacity for certainty. What changed was our method for determining what's true. Science emerged as a systematic way of testing our ideas against reality. It's not perfect, and it doesn't claim to be. Scientists make mistakes. Theories get revised or overturned. But science has a crucial feature that sets it apart. It's self-correcting. When evidence contradicts a scientific theory, the theory must change or be discarded. This humility in the face of evidence has led to an explosion of reliable knowledge about the natural world, knowledge that works, that makes accurate predictions, that allows us to build technologies that function exactly as expected. The device you're using right now, the medicine that keeps people alive, the satellites that let us communicate across the planet, all of these are testament to the power of this method. Religion, by contrast, operates on a different principle entirely. It asks us to accept certain claims on faith, which means believing without evidence or even despite evidence to the contrary. Now, faith is often presented as a virtue, as something admirable and necessary. Many of us grew up hearing that faith is a gift, that doubting is dangerous, that questioning is a sign of weakness or moral failing. But let's think carefully about what faith actually means. If someone told you they had faith that the earth was flat, despite all the photographs from space showing it's roughly spherical, would you consider that virtuous? Probably not. You'd consider it willful ignorance. Faith, when we examine it honestly, is simply the acceptance of claims without good reasons. And while that might feel comforting when the claims are ones we want to believe, it's not a reliable path to truth. This brings us to the first major argument, the profound absence of evidence for religious claims. Every major religion makes extraordinary assertions about the nature of reality. There's a god or gods who created the universe, who care about human behavior, who answer prayers, who perform miracles, who reward the faithful and punish the wicked, either in this life or in an afterlife. These aren't abstract philosophical positions. They're factual claims about how the universe works. They should be testable, at least in principle. And when we test them carefully and honestly, what do we find? Consider prayer. Billions of people pray every day, believing that an intelligent being is listening and might intervene in response. If you've ever prayed yourself, you know how real that feeling of connection can be, how comforting it is to believe someone is listening. If prayer worked in the way religions claim, we should see measurable effects. And indeed, studies have been conducted, carefully controlled experiments where patients recovering from surgery were prayed for by strangers without the patient's knowledge. The researchers made sure the conditions were fair, that the groups were comparable, that the prayers were sincere. The results? No detectable difference in recovery rates between those prayed for and those who weren't. Some patients did better, some did worse, but the outcomes matched what we'd expect from chance alone. This doesn't prove that prayer never works in any sense. Many people find prayer personally meaningful, a form of meditation or self-reflection. But it does suggest that if gods exist and answer prayers, they do so in ways that are completely indistinguishable from chance. And if something is indistinguishable from chance, if there's no detectable effect, what reason do we have to believe it's happening at all, or consider miracles? Religions often cite miraculous events as evidence for divine intervention. Someone recovers from an illness that doctors said was terminal. A disaster is narrowly avoided. A statue appears to weep. And when these things happen to us or people we know, they can feel profoundly significant. But notice something interesting. As our tools for documenting reality have improved, as cameras have become ubiquitous, and our understanding of natural phenomena has deepened, reports of dramatic miracles have become vanishingly rare. We no longer see limbs growing back in front of witnesses. We don't see the sun stopping in the sky. We don't see water turning into wine or seas parting. The miracles that still get reported tend to be ambiguous, the kind that could easily be explained by coincidence, misperception, or natural recovery. Someone's cancer goes into remission, but cancers sometimes do that naturally. Someone survives a car crash, but people often do survive crashes due to modern safety features and quick medical response. These events feel miraculous to those who experience them, and that feeling is real and understandable. But feelings aren't evidence of supernatural intervention. This pattern is telling. It suggests that miraculous claims emerge from ordinary human psychology. From our tendency to see patterns and agency where none exists, from our desire for meaning and intervention in times of crisis, from our need to believe that someone is watching over us. These are deeply human needs, and there's no shame in having them. But the universe, as best we can determine through careful observation, operates according to consistent natural laws. Water doesn't turn into wine. People don't rise from the dead after 3 days. Virgins don't give birth. These things violate everything we know about biology and physics, and the evidence for them consists entirely of ancient texts written by people who knew nothing of biology or physics, who had every reason to exaggerate or embellish, and who lived in cultures where supernatural explanations were the default for anything unusual. This leads to a second major argument: the extraordinary similarity between religious beliefs and obvious human inventions. Think about the thousands of religions that have existed throughout human history. The ancient Greeks had gods who lived on Mount Olympus, who had very human personalities. Zeus was lustful and prone to anger. Hera was jealous. Athena was wise but could be vengeful. These gods had soap opera-level dramas, jealousies, and conflicts. The Norse had their own pantheon with different names and stories, but remarkably similar characteristics, powerful beings with human emotions and flaws. The Romans adopted Greek gods and simply renamed them. The Egyptians, the Aztecs, the Babylonians. Each culture independently invented gods that looked like humans, thought like humans, cared about the things humans care about, and demanded the behaviors that helped that particular society function. The pattern is unmistakable, and once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Religions reflect the cultures that create them. The Christian God, as presented in medieval Europe, cares deeply about sexual morality in exactly the ways that medieval European society cared about sexual morality: virginity, marriage, prohibitions on homosexuality. The Hindu caste system, described as divinely ordained, just happens to reinforce social hierarchies that benefited those at the top. The gods of warrior cultures valued courage in battle above all else. The gods of agricultural societies cared intensely about harvest rituals and seasonal celebrations. If these religions were revealing objective truths about a real deity, wouldn't we expect them to transcend cultural boundaries? Wouldn't we expect them to contain knowledge that their inventors couldn't possibly have had? Instead, they contain exactly the knowledge, values, and concerns of the people who wrote them down, no more and no less. The sacred texts of religions show this even more clearly. These books are presented as the Word of God, perfect and eternal. But when we read them with honest eyes, we find moral instructions that reflect their time and place, not timeless wisdom. We find acceptance of slavery, detailed instructions for buying and selling human beings. We find the subordination of women, rules that treat them as property. We find commands to kill people for trivial offenses, working on the Sabbath, talking back to parents, worshipping the wrong God, being gay. We find a cosmology that's simply wrong about how the world works. The Bible, for instance, describes a flat earth with a solid dome overhead, where the sun and moon are lights placed in the firmament by God to mark days and seasons, where the earth is stationary and everything revolves around it, where there are waters above the dome and below the earth. This is exactly what people in the ancient Near East believed, based on how things appeared to them. It's exactly what we'd expect if humans wrote these texts based on their limited understanding. It's not at all what we'd expect if an all-knowing deity authored them. Now, believers often respond by saying these texts shouldn't be read literally, that they're metaphorical or poetic. And that's fine as far as it goes. Poetry and metaphor have their place. But this raises a troubling question that rarely gets a satisfying answer. How do you decide which parts are literal and which are metaphorical? If you're honest, the pattern is clear. The parts that conflict with modern science or modern morality get reclassified as metaphorical, while the parts that support current beliefs remain literal. Creation story contradicted by geology and biology, that's metaphorical. Moral teachings you agree with, those are literal. This isn't interpretation. It's selective reading, retrofitting ancient text to match what we've learned through other means. If the texts were truly divine, inspired by a being who knows everything, why would they need this constant reinterpretation? Why wouldn't they be clear enough that people across all times and cultures could read them and reach the same conclusions? Instead, we have thousands of Christian denominations alone, each claiming to have the correct interpretation, each reading the same book and coming to different, often contradictory conclusions. This brings us to a third argument that many find compelling: the problem of divine hiddenness. If a God exists who wants us to know about him, who cares whether we believe? Who will reward faith and punish disbelief for eternity? Why would this God make his existence so unclear? Why communicate only through ancient texts that are ambiguous, internally contradictory, and indistinguishable from human writings? Why not provide clear, unambiguous evidence that would convince any reasonable person? Why play hide and seek with something as important as eternal salvation? Some say God wants us to have faith. That obvious evidence would remove the need for faith, and therefore remove its virtue. But think about how strange this is. It suggests that God values credulity over reason, that he prefers we believe without good reasons rather than proportion our beliefs to the evidence. It means that people who are honestly skeptical, who apply the same standards of evidence to religious claims that they apply to everything else in life, are punished for intellectual honesty. It means that the person who demands evidence before believing extraordinary claims, the same standard we'd want a jury to use before convicting someone of. Murder is somehow morally inferior to the person who believes on insufficient evidence. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this divine hiddenness results in thousands of mutually incompatible religions, each claiming to be the one true faith, with no reliable way for sincere seekers to determine which, if any, is correct. How is a person born in India, raised Hindu, supposed to figure out that actually Christianity is true? How is a person born in Saudi Arabia, raised Muslim, supposed to realize that actually Hinduism is correct? They can't both be right, but followers of each are equally convinced, equally sincere, equally sure that they've found the truth. And here's what we observe. People overwhelmingly believe the religion they were taught as children, the religion of their parents and their culture. If you're born in India, you're likely to be Hindu. If you're born in Saudi Arabia, you're likely to be Muslim. If you're born in Mississippi, you're likely to be Baptist. If you're born in Utah, you're likely to be Mormon. This geographical distribution of religious belief is exactly what we'd expect if religions are cultural products, passed down through socialization and tradition, like languages or cuisines. It's not what we'd expect if one religion were objectively true and discoverable through reason or divine revelation. Then there's the problem of evil, perhaps the oldest and most emotionally challenging argument against the existence of a benevolent, all-powerful God. The world contains immense suffering, and this is something we all know if we're paying attention. Children die of painful diseases through no fault of their own. Natural disasters kill thousands indiscriminately. Earthquakes don't spare the righteous. Parasites eat their hosts from the inside out. There's so much pain in the world, much of it serving no apparent purpose, affecting creatures who can't possibly deserve punishment. A child with bone cancer hasn't sinned. An infant born with a devastating genetic disorder hasn't earned that suffering. If God is all-powerful, He could prevent this suffering. If God is all-good and loving, He would want to prevent it. Yet the suffering continues day after day, year after year. The usual response is that suffering builds character, that it's a test of faith, that we can't understand God's mysterious plan, fail to address the sheer scale and pointlessness of much suffering. What character is being built in an infant who dies before they can even form memories? What test is being administered to an animal dying slowly of starvation? What plan requires childhood leukemia? Consider the parasite that burrows into children's eyes and causes blindness, or the bacterium that causes infant meningitis, or the genetic mutations that produce horrible deformities and early death. What purpose do these serve? What lesson do they teach? What greater good do they advance? If a human had the power to prevent such suffering with a snap of their fingers and chose not to, we'd call that human Eve. Ill, monstrous. We'd say they had failed the most basic test of morality. The theological responses to this problem have never been satisfying. Not because theologians aren't clever, they are, but because the problem is genuinely difficult to reconcile with the claim of a loving, attentive, powerful deity who cares about human welfare. The evolutionary explanation, by contrast, fits the observations perfectly. We see suffering because nature is indifferent. Evolution by natural selection produces organisms that are adapted to survive and reproduce, not organisms that are happy or pain-free. Pain is useful from an evolutionary perspective because it motivates us to avoid damage. If you couldn't feel pain, you'd destroy your body through carelessness. Disease exists because pathogens evolve to exploit hosts. That's how they survive and reproduce. Natural disasters kill indiscriminately because earthquakes and hurricanes follow physical laws that have nothing to do with morality or justice or who deserves what. The universe operates according to natural principles that don't care about us, and this explains both the wonder and the horror we observe. It's not pleasant, but it makes sense. Another crucial argument involves the remarkable success of naturalistic explanations. For thousands of years, supernatural explanations were common and accepted. Thunder was the anger of gods. Illness was caused by demons or curses. The diversity of life was the product of special creation. Mental illness was possession. Drought meant the gods were displeased. These explanations felt right to people at the time. They made sense within their worldview. But here's what's striking. As we've developed better tools for investigating nature, as we've learned to conduct controlled experiments and gather systematic evidence, every single mystery we've solved has turned out to have a natural explanation. Not one has required invoking the supernatural. Lightning is electrical discharge in the atmosphere. Illness is caused by pathogens, genetic disorders, environmental factors, autoimmune responses, all natural processes. The diversity of life arose through evolution by natural selection operating over billions of years. Mental illness is caused by brain chemistry, genetics, trauma, all natural factors. Drought is caused by weather patterns influenced by ocean temperatures and atmospheric conditions. This pattern is striking and should give us pause.